The year was 1981. The Cold War was not merely a geopolitical standoff. It was a temperature that dictated the weather of the entire world. In the grand theaters of Washington and Moscow, politicians spoke of deterrence and treaties. But in the alleyways of Beirut, the ports of Limassol, and the banking halls of Zurich, a different game was being played. It was a game of proliferation, where the pieces on the board were not armies, but centrifuges, critrons, and enriched uranium. In the heart of Tel Aviv, inside the windowless briefing rooms of the Mossad, a name had risen from the static of intercepted telexes and human reports: Elias Vorgan. To the public, Vorgan was a Swiss-Austrian logistics magnate, a man whose shipping containers moved harmless consumer goods across the Mediterranean. He was a patron of the arts, a frequent guest at the Vienna Opera, and a man of impeccable, if somewhat reclusive, taste. But to the analysts of the Mossad's research division, Vorgan was something far more sinister. He was a ghost broker. He did not care for ideology. He did not care about the conflict between East and West. He cared only for the physics of leverage. And in 1981, leverage meant selling the components necessary to build a nuclear device to a regime in the Middle East that had sworn Israel's destruction. The intelligence was fragmentary, but terrifying. Vorgan had acquired a stockpile of dual-use high-voltage triggers, devices essential for the precise detonation required in a nuclear implosion. These were not items one could simply buy off a shelf. They required end-user certificates, government clearances, and a labyrinth of shell companies to move. Vorgan had mastered this labyrinth. For 6 months, Mossad's Kaidan unit and surveillance teams had tried to get close. They had tapped his phones, but he spoke in codes that referenced vintage wine shipments. They had tried to turn his secretaries, but his staff was paid better than most heads of state. Vorgan was paranoid, professional, and isolated. He lived in a fortress of his own making, a world of private jets and secure villas where no outsider could tread. The director of Mossad sat at the head of a heavy mahogany table, the smoke from his cigarette hanging low in the recycled air. The file on Vorgan was thin, too thin. "We cannot touch him in Switzerland," the director said, his voice gravelly with fatigue. "The diplomatic fallout would be catastrophic. We cannot touch him in the air. We need him on the ground, in a place where we control the variables. And we need him to bring the inventory list." The inventory list was the key. Vorgan was known to carry a localized ledger, a black book of his deadly commerce, to ensure no digital trail existed. If they could capture Vorgan, they could dismantle the entire network. But Vorgan only lowered his drawbridge for 2 things: rare antiquities and the golden age of cinema. He was obsessed with the glamour of the 1960s, a collector of film memorabilia and a financier of vanity film projects that allowed him to rub shoulders with the stars he idolized from a distance. He fancied himself a producer, a creative mind trapped in a merchant's body. "If we cannot break into his world," a senior case officer named Ari remarked, leaning forward, "then we must build a world that he cannot resist entering." The plan that formed was not a military operation. It was a screenplay. They would not send a commando. They would send a star. The search for the perfect asset was unlike any recruitment drive in the agency's history. They were not looking for a soldier, a linguist, or a thief. They were looking for a woman who could command a room simply by walking into it, someone whose face was known to millions, yet whose private life contained a vulnerability that could be leveraged. They found her in Rome. Isabella Monti was the darling of European cinema. At 28, she possessed a beauty that critics described as haunting. She had the eyes of a woman who had seen too much, and the smile of a woman who could make you forget everything. She was famous, wealthy, and adored. But the Mossad dossier on her revealed the cracks in the marble. Isabella's brother, a reckless gambler with a taste for high-stakes baccarat, had indebted himself to the wrong people in Naples. The debt was astronomical. It was the kind of debt that didn't get resolved with money alone. It got resolved with silence or tragedy. Isabella had been quietly liquidating her assets, selling jewelry and property, trying to keep her brother alive, but the hole was too deep. Ari, the case officer who had conceived the plan, flew to Rome. He didn't approach her at a party or a studio. He approached her at a small, nondescript cafe near the Spanish Steps where she went to escape the paparazzi. When he sat down, she didn't scream or call for help. She simply adjusted her sunglasses and looked at him with the weariness of someone who expects bad news. "I am not a journalist, Miss Monty," Ari said in flawless Italian, "and I am not a fan." "Then you are a debt collector," she replied, her voice steady. "You can tell your bosses I need more time." "I am not here to collect," Ari said, sliding a thin envelope across the table. "I am here to erase." Inside the envelope were photographs of her brother, safe but watched, and a bank statement showing the purchase of his entire debt by a shell company registered in Panama. "Who are you?" she whispered, the color draining from her face. "We are an organization that solves problems," Ari said. "We have solved yours. Your brother is free. The debt is gone. The men in Naples have been paid and told to forget his name." Isabella stared at him, a mixture of relief and terror in her eyes. "People like you don't give gifts. What is the price?" "The price is a performance," Ari said. "The greatest role of your life. But there are no cameras, no second takes, and the audience is an audience of one." Ari laid out the reality. They needed her to be the bait for Elias Vorgan. They needed her to star in a fake film production, a trap designed specifically to lure the nuclear smuggler out of his fortress. She would have to charm a monster, gain his trust, and lead him to a specific location where the Mossad could extract him. "I am an actress," she said, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for her espresso. "I am not a spy. I don't know how to steal secrets or shoot a gun." "We don't need you to shoot," Ari assured her. "We need you to shine. We need you to be Isabella Monti, the icon. Vorgan is obsessed with you. He has a print of your last film in his private screening room. If you invite him, he will come." Isabella looked out at the bustling streets of Rome. She thought of her brother, of the fear that had shadowed their lives for months. She realized she had been acting for a long time, pretending everything was fine while her world crumbled. "Tell me about the character," she said. The operation, codenamed Blue Velvet, required the construction of a complete fiction. Mossad didn't just create a cover story, they created a movie studio. In London, a front company called Aurora Pictures was registered. Offices were rented in Mayfair, furnished with plush carpets, abstract art, and a receptionist who was actually a former communications officer for military intelligence. They hired a legitimate, albeit fading, screenwriter to draft a script, a romantic thriller set in the Mediterranean. It had to look real, feel real, and smell real. Isabella was flown to a safe house in the Negev desert for a crash course in tradecraft. This was not the physical training given to commandos. There were no obstacle courses or firing ranges. This was psychological conditioning. Ari and a team of psychologists spent weeks with her. They taught her how to manage her own physiological responses to fear. They taught her how to control her breathing to lower her heart rate, how to spot surveillance without looking like she was looking, and how to communicate through coded phrases. "The most important thing," Ari told her during a late-night session, "is that you must never break character. Vorgan is paranoid. He looks for inconsistencies. If you are tired, you must be a tired actress, not a tired spy. If you are scared, you must be scared of the production failing, not of him." They built a profile of Vorgan that was deeper than any character study she had ever done. She learned his favorite wines, his disdain for modern architecture, his childhood in post-war Vienna, and his specific brand of arrogance. She learned that his vanity was his armor, but also his chink. He believed he was smarter than everyone in the room, and he believed that a woman like Isabella could genuinely fall for his intellect. Isabella struggled. The isolation of the training was brutal. "I feel like a puppet," she confessed one evening. "You are pulling the strings, and I am just moving my mouth." "You are not the puppet," Ari corrected her. "You are the stage. We are just the stage hands. When the curtain rises, you are the only one who matters." Back in Europe, the trap was being baited. Aurora Pictures announced its new flagship project, The Midnight Sea, starring Isabella Monti. The trade papers, Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, carried the press release, paid for by Mossad intermediaries. The buzz was manufactured, but the excitement was real. And then, the invitation was sent. A heavy, cream-colored card, embossed with gold leaf, inviting Elias Vorgan to an exclusive investors' gala and private dinner with the cast in Monaco. The hook was baited not with metal, but with vanity. Monaco in the summer is a playground for the world's elite. The harbor was choked with super yachts, the air smelled of jasmine and expensive fuel, and the Casino de Monte Carlo stood as a temple to chance. Elias Vorgan did not attend public events, but the allure of the midnight sea and the personal note from Isabella, forged by Mossad specialists who had analyzed her handwriting for days, was too strong. The note hinted that the film needed a man of vision and sophisticated taste to guide its aesthetic, appealing directly to his frustrated artistic ego. The gala was held in a private ballroom of the Hotel de Paris. The room was populated by Mossad agents posing as producers, directors, and wealthy investors, mixed with a few unwitting legitimate socialites to provide cover. The champagne flowed, the orchestra played soft jazz, and the atmosphere was electric. Isabella wore a gown of emerald silk that seemed to catch every photon of light in the room. She stood in the center of the floor, holding court, laughing at jokes, playing the part of the radiant star. But beneath the silk, her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She wore a brooch on her dress that concealed a microscopic microphone. Every word she said, every breath she took was being monitored by a van parked 3 streets away. At 9 p.m. precisely, the doors opened and Elias Vorgan entered. He was a man of average height, with thinning gray hair and a suit that cost more than most cars. He moved with a stiffness that betrayed his discomfort in open spaces, his eyes scanning the room not for friends, but for threats. Flanking him were 2 large men who bulged in their tuxedos, his private security. They were former Stasi agents, ruthless and highly trained. Isabella saw him. The earpiece in her right ear, hidden by her cascading dark hair, crackled with Ari's voice. "Target in sight. Take a breath, Isabella. You are the queen here. He is just a fan." She turned, her smile widening, as if she had been waiting for him all evening. She navigated through the crowd, parting the sea of fake investors, and extended a hand to the man who sold nuclear fire. "Monsieur Vorgan," she said, her voice a velvet purr. "I was beginning to worry that my invitation had been lost." Vorgan stopped. For a moment, the paranoia in his eyes vanished, replaced by the sheer, unadulterated awe of a man meeting his idol. He took her hand, bowing slightly. "Signora Monti," he said, his voice dry and accented. "For you, I would have walked from Vienna." The trap was open. He had stepped onto the stage. The conversation that night was a masterclass in human intelligence gathering. Isabella did not ask about his business. She did not ask about ships or cargo. She talked about art. She talked about the emptiness of the film industry, the lack of men with true substance. "I am surrounded by children," she sighed, sipping her champagne, leading him toward a quieter balcony. "Actors, directors, they play at life. They don't understand the real world. I need a partner in this project who understands the weight of things." Vorgan was mesmerized. He leaned in, smelling her perfume, his ego expanding with every compliment she subtly fed him. "The world is a chaotic place, Isabella," he said. "It requires order. It requires men who are willing to make difficult decisions." "Exactly," she said. "That is why I wanted you. I heard you are a man who moves mountains quietly." He chuckled, a sound devoid of warmth. "I move things, yes, but silence is the most expensive commodity." In the van, Ari and his team were analyzing the audio. Vorgan was relaxing. His body language, captured by hidden cameras in the ballroom, showed him leaning toward her, his defensive posture dropping. But his security guards were a problem. They hovered constantly, their eyes never resting on Isabella, but scanning the perimeter, watching the exits, watching the waiters. They were pros. "We need to separate him," Ari said over the comms. "Isabella, move to phase 2. Isabella turned to Vorgan. "Elias," she said, using his first name for the first time. "This crowd is stifling. I have a suite upstairs. I have the concept art for the film there. I would value your opinion on the cinematography before I show it to the studio heads tomorrow." Vorgan hesitated. His training, his lifetime of caution, warred with his desire. He looked at his guards. "My men come with me," he said. "To the door," Isabella conceded with a playful smile. "But the art, that is for your eyes only. I cannot have brute force in a room of delicate ideas." Vorgan nodded. To the door. It was a partial victory. They had him moving to the kill zone. The suite on the top floor of the Hôtel de Paris was a masterpiece of luxury, but it was also a cage. Mossad technicians had rented the rooms on either side and the floor above. They had drilled pinhole cameras into the molding and replaced the mirrors with two-way glass. Isabella led Vorgan into the suite. The guards stationed themselves in the hallway, arms crossed, immovable objects. Inside, Isabella poured drinks. Her hands were steady now. The performance had taken over. She was no longer Isabella Monti. She was the character she had created. She showed him the sketches, beautiful, moody charcoal drawings of Mediterranean landscapes created by the Mossad art department. Vorgan critiqued them, his arrogance in full display. "The lighting is too soft," he said. "Reality is harsher." "Show me reality," Isabella challenged him, sitting on the sofa, leaving space for him. "Tell me about the world you see." Vorgan sat. He drank the whiskey. It was undrugged. Mossad could not risk him tasting a chemical or passing out too early. They needed him lucid enough to reveal the location of the ledger, or at least to lower his guard enough for the extraction team to enter without a firefight. "I see a world where power is the only truth," Vorgan said, his eyes drifting over her. "Nations are just lines on a map. True power is the ability to erase those lines." He was getting close to the edge. He was boasting. This was the hubris the psychologists had predicted. But then, the phone in the suite rang. Isabella froze. No one was supposed to call. The line was monitored. Vorgan looked at the phone, his eyes narrowing. "Who knows you are here?" "Everyone," she said quickly. "I am a star, Elias. The phone always rings." She moved to answer it, but Vorgan stood up, his hand moving inside his jacket. "Don't answer it." The tension in the room spiked. In the hallway, the guards shifted. In the command van, Ari cursed. "We have a breach. Someone is calling the room." It was the hotel concierge. A mistake? A warning? Isabella looked at Vorgan. She saw the paranoia returning, the spell breaking. She had to act. She walked past the phone and unplugged it from the wall. "I told you," she said, turning to him, her eyes blazing with feigned anger. "I want no interruptions. If you are going to be suspicious of a ringing phone, Elias, then perhaps you are not the man I thought you were." It was a gamble. She questioned his masculinity and his control. Vorgan stared at her. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. Then he laughed. "You have fire, Isabella. I like that." He took his hand out of his jacket. He relaxed. "We are back on," Ari whispered in her ear. "Good work." The plan was for a room service cart to be delivered. Inside the cart, concealed beneath the table drapes, would be 2 keyed-on operatives. When the door opened, they would neutralize the guards with silenced pneumatics and storm the room. But Vorgan changed the script. "I have seen enough art," he said, standing up abruptly. "I want to show you something. My yacht is in the harbor, the Aurora. It is fitting, no? The name of your studio." Isabella's blood ran cold. The yacht was a fortress. It would be filled with armed crew. Mossad had no assets on the boat. If she went there, she would be completely cut off. "It is late, Elias," she said. "The night is young," he countered. "And I have a bottle of 1945 Romanée Conti. You cannot refuse that." He was testing her. If she refused, he would know she was trying to keep him in the hotel. If she agreed, she was walking into the lion's den. "Ari," she whispered, barely moving her lips, pretending to scratch her ear. "What do I do?" There was silence on the line. Ari was weighing the life of his asset against the capture of the target. "Go," Ari said. "We will adapt. Do not lose him." Isabella smiled at Vorgan. "I love the ocean. Let's go." The ride to the harbor was silent. Vorgan's limousine was armored. Isabella sat beside him, her mind racing. She had no weapon. Her microphone might not transmit through the steel hull of the yacht. The Aurora was a sleek, 50-meter vessel, gleaming white in the harbor lights. Crew members in white uniforms stood at attention. They looked less like sailors and more like mercenaries. As they boarded, Vorgan took her elbow. His grip was possessive. "Welcome to my true home," he said. They moved to the main salon. It was opulent, filled with stolen art and heavy furniture. Vorgan poured the wine. Isabella realized her comms were failing. The static in her earpiece was deafening. The yacht's hull was shielding the signal. She was alone. She had to signal the team. She needed to get him onto the deck, into the open, where the directional microphones and scopes could find them. "This is beautiful," she said, looking around, "but I feel trapped inside. Can we drink on the deck? The moon is full." Vorgan frowned. "I prefer the privacy of the salon." "Please," she said, stepping close to him, her hand resting on his chest. "For me, I want to feel the wind." Vorgan sighed. "Very well." The upper deck. They moved up. The night air was cool. They stood by the railing, looking out at the lights of Monte Carlo. Suddenly, Isabella saw a small red flash from the shoreline, a kilometer away. It was a signal, a laser pulse. The team was there. They were watching. But how would they get to her? The yacht was surrounded by water. Vorgan leaned against the railing. "You know, Isabella, I have business partners who would pay millions just to stand where I am standing." "Business," she said, turning the conversation. "You always talk of business. What is it that you actually move, Elias? Gold, diamonds, power," he said softly. "I move the future." "Show me," she challenged. "You talk in riddles. I am an actress. I deal in scripts. Show me the script of your life." Vorgan hesitated. The wine, the beauty, the night, it was intoxicating. "You want to see?" "I want to know the man," she said. He reached into his inner pocket. He pulled out a small black leather notebook. "This," he said, tapping it. "This is the script. In here are the names of kings and presidents. In here is the map of the next war. The ledger." He had it on him. Isabella's heart stopped. It was right there. All she had to do was take it, but if she reached for it, the guards, standing 10 feet away in the shadows, would kill her. The water around the yacht was dark and still, but beneath the surface, silent shadows were moving. Mossad's naval commando unit, Shayatet 13, had been deployed as a contingency. Using closed-circuit rebreathers that released no bubbles, 4 frogmen were attaching magnetic climbing grips to the hull of the Aurora on the seaward side, away from the dock. Isabella didn't know they were there. She only knew she had to keep Vorgan occupied. "Read to me," she said, leaning back against the railing, her silhouette framed against the city lights. "Tell me a story from your book." Vorgan opened the book. He was drunk on his own importance. "Here," he pointed. "Project Babylon. Do you know what that is?" "No, of course not. It is a gun that can shoot into space. I supplied the steel." As he spoke, a shadow detached itself from the darkness behind the rear superstructure of the yacht. It was a figure in a wet black wetsuit, moving with the silence of a phantom. The guard nearest to them turned. He sensed something. Isabella saw the guard turn. She had to distract him. She laughed, a loud, pealing sound that cut through the night air. She stumbled slightly, spilling her wine on Vorgan's jacket. "Oh, Elias, I am so clumsy," she cried, grabbing his lapels, pulling him toward her, blocking his view of the guard. Vorgan looked down at the stain, annoyed. "Isabella, please." In that split second of distraction, a pneumatic dart hissed through the air. The guard slumped, catching himself on the railing before sliding down. The second guard, hearing the slide, turned. The second frogman was already over the rail. A swift, brutal strike to the carotid artery, and the second guard was unconscious before he could draw his weapon. Vorgan looked up from his jacket. What was that? He turned. He saw his men on the deck. He saw the dark figures rising from the sea. He reached for his pocket, not for a gun, but for the ledger. He was going to throw it overboard. Isabella saw his hand move. She didn't think. She didn't act like a star. She acted like a desperate sister saving a brother. She lunged. She grabbed Vorgan's wrist with both hands. He was stronger than her, fueled by adrenaline. He struck her across the face, a heavy blow that sent her reeling back against the railing. But she didn't let go of the book. "Let go!" he screamed. His composure shattered. The frogmen were on him. There was no dramatic fight. It was a swarm. One man took his legs, another his arms. A third applied a sedative injection to his neck. Vorgan's eyes went wide. He looked at Isabella, who was gasping for breath, clutching the railing, blood trickling from her lip. "You," he whispered, his voice slurring. "The performance. Cut," Isabella whispered. Vorgan slumped. The ledger fell from his hand. Isabella caught it before it hit the deck. The extraction was a blur of efficiency. Vorgan was placed in a large waterproof gear bag, ventilated but secure. The ledger was sealed in a waterproof pouch and strapped to the lead commando. "We need to go now," the team leader hissed. "The bridge crew will check in any minute." They looked at Isabella. She was shivering, holding her bruised cheek. She couldn't swim out with them. She wasn't trained for the rebreathers. "We have a Zodiac boat inbound," the leader said. 2 minutes. A small, silent rubber boat, running on an electric motor, glided out of the darkness. Isabella was helped over the railing. As she stepped into the boat, she looked back at the Aurora. The guards were still unconscious. The wine glass was shattered on the deck. They sped away into the darkness of the Mediterranean, leaving the yacht drifting in the silence. By the time the sun rose over Monaco, Isabella was on a private jet heading back to Rome. Elias Vorgan was on a different plane, a cargo transport heading to a secure facility in Israel. The interrogation of Vorgan was quiet and civilized. Confronted with the ledger and the betrayal, his arrogance collapsed. He traded everything, the names of the suppliers, the shipping routes, the accounts, in exchange for a prison cell with a window and a promise that he would not be handed over to the regimes he had failed. The nuclear trigger shipment was intercepted in a warehouse in Rotterdam 2 days later. The network was dismantled. The centrifuge parts never reached their destination. A program that could have killed millions was set back by a decade. Isabella arrived in Rome. She went to her apartment. She locked the door. Ari came to see her 3 days later. He found her sitting on her balcony reading a script. "He is secure," Ari said. "The operation was a complete success." Isabella didn't look up. "And my brother?" "He is in Canada. New name, new business. He is safe." Isabella nodded. She touched her cheek where a faint bruise was covered by makeup. "You were brave, Isabella," Ari said. "More than brave. You saved many lives." "I lied to a man who trusted me," she said softly. "He was a monster, yes, but the trust, that was real. That was the only real thing that night. It was necessary," Ari said, "the standard justification of his trade." "Perhaps," she said. "But do not ask me to act again, Ari. I have retired from your stage." Isabella Monti continued her career. She won awards. She aged gracefully. The world knew her as the queen of the screen. They knew nothing of the night in Monaco, of the bruise she hid, or the nuclear fire she had extinguished with a lie. Elias Vorgan disappeared from the world. His business empire was dissolved. The official story was that he had died of a heart attack while on vacation. His collection of film memorabilia was auctioned off. Years later, a package arrived at Isabella's home. It was unsigned. Inside was a rare vintage poster of The Midnight Sea, the fake film that had never been made. She stared at it for a long time. Then she lit a match and watched the edges curl and blacken, the image of the glamorous actress consuming itself in fire, leaving nothing but ash. In the world of intelligence, the greatest victories are the ones that no one sees, the bombs that don't explode, the wars that don't start, and the actors who play their parts not for applause, but for survival. This story is a work of fiction inspired by real tradecraft. If you want to uncover more about the real operations that shaped history, make sure to subscribe and check out our other videos on the channel. The truth is often stranger than fiction.